Hey, remember when the experts told us that what Trump was doing wouldn't work? I think recently they predicted it was only 2.3% GDP growth was going to be. 1.1 was good under Biden, if you remember. But yeah, that's weird. He outperformed that kind of by a lot.
GDP comes out better than expected, 3%, complete reversal over the first quarter.
3%? That was well above the Fed Chair Jerome Powell's target rate, what he said he needed to lower interest rates, which he's, again, refused to do today. And Trump called him out on Truth Social, saying second quarter GDP just out 3%, way better than expected. Too late, must now lower the interest rate. No inflation, let people buy and refinance their homes. Yup. And in any other normal economy, without a Trump-hating Fed chair, that would happen. You see, since the Fed took over interest rates, which, by the way, I don't think was a good idea, in an ideal economy, inflation is just under interest rates. For instance, if you have a 1% inflation rate, you shouldn't have much more than a 2% interest rate, which is what we had in Trump's first term. Growth exploded. Conversely, when inflation spikes, like it did under Jimmy Carter, when Reagan came in and appointed Volcker to run the Fed, they had to raise interest rates to like 18% to counteract the inflation at the same time. Now, I've talked about this before, about only two levers to control our economy. Congress controls fiscal policy, which means how much money we spend and how much we're taxed. If Congress spends more money and doesn't tax us more, they have to print more money to cover their balance. We've been doing this for the last, actually longer than the last 25 years, but really ramped up in the last 25 years, which is why we have $37 trillion in debt. And what's that done? Inflation. If you had $1 in your pocket in the year 2000 and you went to sleep and you woke up today with the same dollar in your pocket, it's only worth 52 cents. The US dollar, I mean, it's depreciated by almost 50% in 25 years. And that's because we put more dollars in the system. I mean, we printed more. Don't even get me started on leaving the gold standard. That's a whole nother day. Now, the fine balance in our system is how the government borrows money. And here's where the Fed is coming in. Monetary policy. That's the other lever in controlling the economy. They sell bonds to us or foreign countries or whoever will buy them to cover the money they print, borrow, which they pay interest on. And the key point that makes bonds attractive is that they're government guaranteed, low risk, and the interest rate usually outperforms the depreciation rate of the dollar. The way the economy keeps from crashing, though, is if you were to, give that same dollar to the government to buy their bonds, in return from interest on that bond would be greater than the depreciation of your value. So basically your dollar wouldn't lose value if you invested in bonds. That's the whole scheme here, okay? And here's where it gets really interesting. If there's too much interest being paid on your dollar compared to inflation, I mean, it's great for you in the short run. You're making a ton of money. But in the long run, your tax dollars are actually paying that interest that you are earning. The government's taking a ton of your money and only giving you a little bit back. And this is what Trump is faced with right now. In the coming months, we need to refinance about $7 trillion worth of our debt, or those bonds that we've guaranteed people a return on. The current interest rate that Powell is holding is 4.5%. If those bonds, our debt, are refinanced at that current rate, the federal government will be paying out $315 billion a year just in interest. That has to be paid for by tax revenue or borrowing money, which also requires interest on that. But if Jerome Powell lowers it to 1%, as Trump has been calling for, I mean, that's very aggressive, but I'm with him on that one, it would only cost us $70 billion to service that every single year. Now, here's something that the economist and all the king's horses and all the king's men don't consider when they make prediction on Trump's economy. Growth. Trump has bent, actually, he's shattered conventional knowledge of economic function by forcing growth. Look, his tariffs are working when everybody said they wouldn't. GDP at 3%, 30% higher than most predictions out there. And look, my man is a real estate guy. And what do real estate people do? They build stuff. Jerome Powell is wrongly placed, had a bunch of wrongly placed concerns, actually, but this is one of them, that if he lowers interest rates too much, they won't be able to sell bonds because the yield, or the amount of money made off them for the buyers, you and I, won't be attractive enough to attract investors, which will push people into the stock market, which, by the way, will make the Fed lose power, and it will create a boom away from bonds. But you know what will also happen that Jerome Powell's not even considering? Growth. Our system functions on debt. If I want to buy $1 million house and I don't have $1 million in the bank to buy it, I have to take out a loan. And that $1 million house is a lot more affordable at 1% interest rate than at a 6.5% interest rate, which they're currently at, which would be at 6.5%. For me to buy $1 million house over a 30-year term would be $2.5 million paid over 30 years. At 1%, over the life of that same mortgage, that same home will only cost $1.3 million. And that's the mortgage, the interest, and the home. That's literally half the price, half the payments every month. Currently, we're nearing a crisis point with the amount of homes on the market. The value of homes increased so much in the last few years that everybody's putting their homes on the market, hoping to make a buck. But because my generation is not, let's just say, excelled as much in the workforce as the boomers, there's not enough buyers. Also, people who took out 5 or 7 year interest-only ARMs at 1, 2, maybe even 3% are now having to refinance those maturing mortgages at not 2%, but 6.5%, many of which they can't afford that type of interest rate adjustment. That literally doubles your mortgage every month, pushing a large supply of houses onto the market. As a result, we haven't seen this many houses sit on the market this long since before the 2008 financial crisis, which Trump actually said today he's starting with the veteran home loan protections.
So I'm thrilled to sign the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act into law, and that is something that they've wanted to do for a long time. This legislation provides desperately needed relief to veterans and their families who have fallen behind on their mortgages, of which there are a lot because we have somebody that doesn't want to lower interest rates. Probably won't lower them today. It's a really sort of an amazing situation.
There it is. This is just another reason why Trump is pushing so hard to lower those interest rates, to make it cheaper for the newer generation, or really anyone, to buy homes. And he's trying to prevent another 2008 crash, because we've seen the median age of home buyers is rising a lot. And this is affecting blue states disproportionately, mostly because their policies suck and everyone's leaving the state, which is their own fault for the stupid rules that they put in place. But it's happening. And what they don't understand, which is generally the Democrats' problem, is that they're economically illiterate, as I said. Places like Portland, Oregon, they're courting new developers to build more homes there because their economies are failing. But the problem is people aren't buying the homes that are already built. And over the last 3 years, Oregon is seeing an average of a 6% decline in their population, which means they don't need to build new homes. So developers won't do it because there's no ROI. There's no return on that investment. They need to lower taxes and stop transing the kids, and maybe people will start moving back. But if people like Jerome Powell and Elizabeth Warren, if they would just stop being such monoliths and realize that Trump is actually walking and chewing gum at the same time, they would understand that all the factors I just explained, and a lot more, by the way, need to work together. The guy knows what he's doing. Maybe people like Jerome Powell should listen to him.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.